In a few weeks, a new college term is going to be starting for millions of students, and for the first time in 4 years, I will not be going back to school. Looking back, each year of college definitely had its own experiences and challenges, and this is what I would go back and tell myself as a freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior on what to do, what to expect, and how to make the most out of the next year. I feel like freshman year is simultaneously the least important and the most important year of college, which I realize doesn't really make any sense, but let me try and explain. In terms of your classes, it's probably going to feel pretty reminiscent of high school. You'll have some general classes like your maths, your sciences, your history, your humanities, and probably a handful of classes that actually have anything to do with your major. Now, of course, this is going to be a little bit different if you're coming in with a lot of credits. However, I would also argue that that would then make you a sophomore by credit hours, as everyone likes to say, in which case you'll probably want to watch some of the next section of this video as well. It's also not really expected that you're going to be landing an internship or any research because it's really challenging to do this as a freshman. It's definitely not impossible. I was able to do it, but a lot of people aren't going to be willing to give you a chance simply because you don't have any experience. Now, there are some programs designed specifically for freshmen and sophomores, and I would definitely recommend looking into those. But for the most part, the expectation is pretty low of you actually landing any sort of job or internship out of your freshman year. It's also important to remember not to overload yourself, which I know for some of you, depending on your personalities, is probably easier said than done. It can definitely be tempting to try to knock out a bunch of credits right away or get involved in a whole bunch of clubs or maybe even join a fraternity or a sorority, but it's important to slow down and not try to do too much in too little time. Realistically, the start of college is probably going to be a pretty big transition, whether that be moving away from home and your family or just having a lot more independence. And layering all of that on top of taking classes and joining clubs is really a lot of stuff to take in, and you want to make sure you don't burn yourself out in your very first semester of your whole college experience. But like I alluded to at the beginning of this section, there's two main reasons why freshman year can be super important for you. First off, college is a marathon and not a sprint, so it's a good idea to try to get started on the right foot. And this can look like anything from getting solid grades in your first semester, building up some good habits like not staying up all night playing video games, just overall building up a good foundation for yourself, so that's going to take you all the way through college when things start to get a little bit tougher and your life gets a bit more hectic. And the second thing is try to get out and make some social connections, even if you're antisocial or shy. I am definitely not the most outgoing and social person. Anyone who knows me can probably attest to that. But it's really important, especially when you're a freshman, to get to know the people in your classes, in clubs, on your floor. These are some of the people who potentially are going to be your friends all throughout college. In my experience, a lot of my close friends were people I lived with in my first year on my floor. And don't waste this opportunity by sitting alone in your dorm room to really go and meet some people who will hopefully help get you through the tough times in college. Alright, so sophomore year is definitely when things start getting a little bit more intense, both in terms of your class difficulty in the classes you're taking, as well as the job hunt. Now that you have a year of college under your belt, you're going to have access to more internship and research opportunities. First off, now you actually have some skills from taking a year's worth of classes, but you also have a GPA, which makes you a little bit more easy to compare to other candidates. That being said, it is definitely not a given that you'll get an internship as a sophomore. A lot of places are really only looking for juniors, and as a result, you'll need to be a very competitive sophomore to even get an interview, let alone a job. As a result, if you're serious about trying to get an internship as a sophomore, you should be applying everywhere and doing a ton of prep on the side to get yourself ready, in addition to trying to bulk up your resume, not with fake stuff, but with actual experience. And that leads me nicely into my next point, which is now that you have a year of college under your belt and you have an idea of what you can and cannot handle, this is when you might want to start looking into some of those clubs a little bit more seriously and seeing how you can get a bit more involved and furthering your skill set outside the classroom. Now, this definitely can be focused around your major or your specialization, but I do want to point out that it doesn't need to be. All that really matters is that you're passionate about whatever you're showing up to, because if you don't really care about that club, you'll probably go to a couple of meetings half-heartedly and then never show up again. And, well, in terms of classes, they're going to get harder. Now, admittedly, with GPA inflation being what it is, I wouldn't really expect any of those classes to be knocking you out of your major or your college unless you're not actually taking it seriously, in which case, well, that's your own fault. But it is important to note that some of the classes you're taking this year will definitely be a bit tougher than those fluffier classes you might have been taking as a freshman. Looking back, I would probably say that sophomore year was the hardest or second hardest year of college for me, so definitely keep that in mind when you're scheduling your credits. Don't assume that you're going to be able to take a ton of them because it's going to be as easy as freshman year, because odds are it's not going to be. Heading into my junior year, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of other people as well, one of my biggest focuses was on landing a coveted junior internship. Now, just to be completely transparent, I already had an internship as a freshman and then a different one as a sophomore, so I was already on pretty good footing here. But the junior internship is important because one, you don't have any more excuses about companies not wanting to consider you because you're a freshman or a sophomore, you're a junior. This is when they want you. And second, if you do well at your junior internship, you're more likely to be getting a return offer to become a full-time, which after all is why we all went to college. In fact, I had already started the job hunt and the interview process for my junior internship in the summer before my junior year even started. So almost a full year before I'd be starting the internship, I was already applying to places and doing interviews, and I was really taking this seriously because I knew this was a huge opportunity. If you're lucky, you might be able to secure something in the fall semester, and that's what happened to me. I got my job in October, and after that I was able to focus on school and didn't have to worry about the stresses of applying different places and prepping for interviews. Which is definitely a good thing because junior year, just like sophomore year, is also a pretty challenging year of college in terms of classes. At least in some sense, I would say this is probably when college starts getting a little bit more fun, at least if you're excited about your major. And that's because you really start getting into your major specific classes and some different specializations that you maybe hadn't been able to do in your first 2 years of college. In some cases, what you might notice is that these classes have a little bit more challenging material than the so-called weed out classes, but on the other hand, a lot of the professors aren't too worried about weeding you out of the major anymore because you're finally a junior, and as a result, they're probably going to be a little bit more lenient actually in terms of the grading. Now, before anyone gets mad at me, that definitely is not the case for every class. I definitely had some professors in my junior year who were not on that train of thought and were definitely not making their grading more lenient. It also didn't help that COVID started in the spring of my junior year, which completely threw everything off. But the truth is, overall, I think that was the trend I noticed, and my classes in my junior year, despite being more complex in terms of material, actually graded a little bit easier. And then in terms of research or clubs or any other sort of involvement, what you did over the past 2 years here is really going to start making a bit of a difference. If you just start a club this year, realistically, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're probably not going to be able to get too involved before you graduate from college. On the other hand, if you actually started a club as a freshman, by the time you're a junior, you actually might be moving into a leadership role, which can definitely be a great experience and also something good to put on your resume. And I should probably mention this in addition to the whole spiel I gave about getting a junior internship. This is a really big time to take a step back and look at your college experience and make sure you're getting out of it what you want. So maybe it is just trying to get a job straight out of school, in which case an internship might be your best bet. But there's a whole bunch of you out there who are probably considering going to grad school, and this is a really big time to make sure you're on track for doing that and figuring out what you really want to do with your life after you graduate from college. To be clear, there's no one correct answer to this question. For some people, it's going to be going out and getting a job, like I did. For other people, it's going to grad school. For others, it's going to be doing a startup. It really depends on what you want to do. And of course, you don't need to have your mind completely made up yet. It's not like your life is going to be set in stone based off what you decided as a junior in college. But this really is an important time to start having those conversations and start thinking about what it is you want to do after you graduate. Alright, we finally made it. It is now senior year of college. Now, admittedly, I have a pretty interesting perspective on my senior year because I did it during the entirety of COVID, and as a result, all of my classes were online. First off, like I just discussed in the section about juniors, what comes next should now be your number one priority. You're going to graduate in less than a year, and you need to figure out, are you getting a job? Are you doing a startup? Are you going into research? Are you going into grad school? What are you going to do in 9 months when you get your diploma and you head on your way and you're done with college? If your number one goal is to secure a job and you don't have a return offer waiting, then you should be doing a ton of interview prep, applying everywhere, and making sure you are as good of a candidate as you possibly can be. Admittedly, I was pretty lucky to get a return offer from my junior internship, so I didn't have to go through this stressful process, but I promise you, if I had not gotten a return offer, I would have been doing a ton of prep every day and applying to new places, literally every day, because that's what I did as a sophomore and a junior, to make sure that I got something that I was happy with by the time I graduated from college. Of course, if your focus is not on getting a job, then this is probably going to look a bit different for you. Maybe that's preparing for standardized tests and taking them, applying to grad schools, or actually launching your startup and really getting that moving before you even graduate from college. And in terms of your classes, the number one thing you need to do, and it's super simple, but people do mess it up, is you need to know your degree requirements. If there's one gym class that you needed to take before you graduate, and it's your second semester of college and you haven't fit that into your schedule, you're not going to be able to get that diploma, and you're going to have to go back for a whole other semester of college and pay for it too, just to be able to get that one gym credit. And that sucks. Hopefully you've been on the ball and this won't happen to you, or you'll have counselors who are on the ball for you and will tell you which classes you're missing. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to make sure that you're taking all of the classes you need to fulfill the requirements of your degree. So if you're not sure, go book a meeting with your counselor, go look online if you have a portal where you can see what you need to take. Just make sure you've taken everything you need to take and that's all squared away before it's too late. In terms of the actual classes that you take, unless you happened to miss some classes earlier on in college and you're making up for those in your senior year, this is going to be when you take your most specialized courses. For example, in my case, I'm a computer science major, but on top of that, my specializations were devices and intelligence. As a result, as a senior, most of the classes I was taking were specifically within the computer science major, talking about devices or intelligence. Beyond that, I also had to take a certain number of electives before I was allowed to graduate, so I used those on some other classes that I didn't need to take, like computer law, that I thought would be interesting and would supplement the rest of my classes that I was taking. And probably the most important part of your senior year, although getting a job and making sure you actually graduate are both incredibly important, is making sure you enjoy it. It's your last year of college, it's your last year potentially with your friends on your campus, and you want to make sure you get all of the things done that you wanted to do in college. Unfortunately, this is definitely something I'm speaking from experience on, because in my first couple years of college, there were things that I could have and maybe should have done, and I said, you know what, if I want to, I'll do that in my junior or senior year of college. Then COVID happened, which no one predicted, and all of a sudden I couldn't do those things as a senior. Now, naturally, I couldn't have predicted that, but I guess that just goes to show that when you have the opportunity to do something, instead of putting it off until the next year, you should probably go and do it. And that's not to say that my senior year was a complete wash. I still got to live with my friends and I had a lot of fun experiences along the way, but there's definitely a couple things that I'll probably look back on and say, should have done that in my early years of college when I had the chance, instead of putting it off until all of a sudden it wasn't an option anymore. If you've made it this far in the video, hopefully by now you've realized that there's no one single formula for what your college experience is going to look like. I've spoken a lot about my own experiences, but obviously there's a lot of room for variation depending on what your major is, what school you go to, and just really what you want to get out of college. Anyways, if you've enjoyed this video, please do me a huge favor and hit that thumbs up button and consider sharing it. I would definitely appreciate it. If you're new here, consider subscribing for new videos coming very soon. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.